the opportunity to find a seat. So, first of all, good morning, everybody. I hope you had a good night's rest. And I think the first thing I want to do this morning is a big thank you to Africa for such a wonderful and atmospheric networking event yesterday. And I hope that all of you now learned what I did, that it's not like this, it's more like this, right? And I think we have a little video on this. Click once more. Let's see. So Yuhulu, you went out there so you can see. So I think we had really all a lot of fun. Thank you so very much. That was really, I think, very relaxing after working through a full day of information, education, exchange to do this in a more relaxed environment. Thank you. So I think my slide before, I just wanted to point out again that we don't want to let anybody today go home if you still have questions. So just that you're aware, in the afternoon, we will have small rooms where experts are available for you to answer questions which you might still have. So from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 4, you're invited to just come in and ask whatever you want to know from us. Will be just for those people also who say still, I have not understood that, I did not want to ask in the big audience, so just come in and ask us directly, okay? Good, and with that, we open the plenary, and we open the plenary with the topic which we have really as a motto of the conference, traceability for patient safety. I'm very glad to have Pascal here from Pfizer, who will give us his perspective and the Pfizer perspective.
Good morning, everyone. So, yeah, my name is Pascal Olagnier. I work for Pfizer since 12 years now in the Global Sterilization Program, as we call internally market customer engagement. So I'm working really very closely with the different customer, with the different market. And my region or my geographical area is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So what we will see today in my presentation, after a quick introduction about Pfizer, our purpose, our mission, and a quick look also on the operation in Africa for Pfizer. We will look very quickly on the GS1 standard application again. I will not spend so much time on that because we have seen again and again the same slides, but just to remind what we are talking about when we want to implement traceability for patient safety. And then we will see why traceability and how to achieve traceability really for the patient safety. But first, quickly about Pfizer. So really, our purpose is to innovate, to bring therapies to patients that significantly improve their lives. So that's really the one vision and the one purpose for the company. Behind that, we have our mission, which is to be the premier and innovative biopharmaceutical company. And you know, so below this, as always, and as for many companies, I guess, so we have 4 imperatives, but what is more important for me personally is the values. So we have many different values where every employee of the company is bringing and really try to put in their daily job to improve the patient safety at the end. And for me, the most important, I will not go through all the values, but for me, the most important is community. So really to be engaged with community and to work for community. Integrity is, for my personal point of view as well, very important. And collaboration. I mean, we heard collaboration many times since the last 2 days, but internal collaboration and external collaboration is, I mean, very important. So company overview. Obviously, we are a big company, but my point here and what I wanted to highlight is our network. We have a complex network with almost or around 63 internal manufacturing sites. We are working with more than 450 contract manufacturers. That means they are doing the manufacturing or the packaging for us. And we are dealing with more than 13,000 supply partners. So as you can see, it's a very complex network. We have a very big also portfolio of product and presentations. So more than 25,000 different presentations. And we are covering a lot of different operating or what we call operating units. So from the biopharmaceutical to the consumer healthcare, so really, you know, vaccines, aseptics, etc. So my point really here is to show you the complexity of Pfizer business. And when we talk about the implementation of traceability, if you look on this network, you can imagine the work and the effort we need to do. But we have to do that. That's not the question. So we do that. But that's, again, for me, where and when standards is very important to allow us as a big manufacturers to implement traceability very fast and to meet the needs of the patient and the needs of the citizen. So now when we are talking about Africa, so here it's a view about our, what we call Pfizer Global Supply Operations. So it's really the part of the company that is making the product and distributing the product. As you can see, we have 5 local manufacturing sites, so internal manufacturing sites in Africa. All of them are located in North Africa, where we have also in-house distribution center, so distribution center owned by Pfizer. And for the rest of the countries, we are working with 3PL, so third-party logistics, that they are working for us to distribute the product and to do the logistics ready on the market. And we have also some manufacturing sites and distribution center in the Middle East. So mainly in Saudi and in the Gulf region. So we have at least, I guess, a good footprint in Africa. If we look on the operation, so what it means. So we are serving 68 markets in Africa. We have around 3,000 different presentations or products distributed in the continent. And just for these distributions, these logistic operations, we have around 162 colleagues working in the different countries locally to help this distribution and to manage the distributions. So it's a kind of important region for us, and it's really important to help again to drive and to enhance patient safety. Okay, so GS1 standard application again and again. What I would like to focus here is really to remind you when we are talking about traceability and when we want to start with traceability, what are the basics? And again, everything is starting with the identification of the product. So the identify part of the GS1 standard, where you have the key data element, the GTIN again, the expiry date, the lot number. And when you want to implement serialization, you will add the serial number. This is really important. This is the starting point to really be able to identify your product. And then you have the capture, where you will use data carrier to put all this information in your packaging and to allow the different stakeholders, the different users to capture the information very easily. And we will see that a little bit later. For sure, sharing information is also very important. So you will have to share the information with your trading partner, etc. So we saw that also during the different sessions. But for me, again, if we want to talk about the basics, if we want to start traceability, identification and capture are the most important. So then a simple question, why traceability? So, you know, sometimes and very often huge impacts can be made and can start with simple interventions. So like access to clean water or access to nutrition, but also access to vaccines for young people. So that's really can be a simple intervention, but with huge impact. And the question really is, if we talk about vaccines, are we sure that the vaccines are reaching the children or the people in need? And, you know, if we look on the inventory management in the continent, so traditionally the inventory management for vaccine is paper-based. So paper-based inventory management, as you may know, is really, you know, source of error because it's human process. So it's really burdensome and not secure. So, and as also we have seen in the last days in many presentations, if we talk about the supply chain of vaccine and supply chain in the low or medium income countries, it's often very long, very segmented, and very complex. So what we can do to address these different challenges? I mean, for me, the first stage, and that's what we saw inside Pfizer, it's let's start to improve presentation and packaging of vaccines. That's a simple start, that's a simple step, but we can have with this a huge impact. And we can start traceability. So when we talk about presentation and packaging, a solution is the barcode, obviously. So that's coming into the mind of everybody, I guess. And it's the simple solution. And that's really what we tried to focus in the past. We are still working very hard on that. And just to show that this simple solution, adding a barcode with the needed information in it, can really have a huge impact again. So you can ask, why a barcode? So let's have a look. So, you know, what barcoding can bring to help us? First is about the accuracy. It's obvious that if you use a barcode, if you use a barcode reader, so a kind of automation to capture the data, you will remove all the human errors that the people are doing when they capture data. So, you know, we have, I think, all made in at least one time in our life, copying data manually from one source to another. And I mean, error is human, as I like to say. So it's normal. So usage of barcode will really improve accuracy. Then we are talking about efficiency. It's also obvious that when you will use a scanner to scan the barcode and to extract the information, you will really speed up the data entry process. Visibility. So I think we also spoke a lot of visibility in this conference. So using barcode, using data about your package and your product will really help us and allow us to have a real-time inventory reporting and to allow quicker decision and have a really a good view on your inventory in each steps of your supply chain. And last but not least, it's about data security. So if you use a barcode, if you use a central system, you will be able to secure your data in a very higher way than if you have multiple systems in each step of your supply chain again. So data security will also be improved with the usage of barcode. So let's have a look on Pfizer experience. So what we did in Nicaragua, so we launched a pilot some years ago to try to implement the 2D barcode for vaccines, but together with a system behind to help to capture the information and to manage the inventory. So really the main objectives of the program were to demonstrate compelling evidence and really advance the dialogue between the different stakeholders. The second one was really to work with the solution provider and enrich open source supply chain system. And last but not least, again, it was to try to accelerate impact on global health. So what we have done is we have selected 7 different sites, pilot sites, across the supply chain of vaccines in the country. So really from a very central point or central level at the national store through the very last mile, the health centers. And we also selected sites on the what we call the secondary level, so at the district level, and at the municipality level, so the tertiary level. So really to cover all the supply chain, all the distribution on the vaccines in the country. And what we did with all these sites, with the end user, is to implement a project. If we look on the implementation methodology, if I'm moving to the next slide, yeah. So what was our strategy? So it's a kind of standard project. If you are familiar with the project implementation phases, you know. So we really start with the first stage, what was scoping and planning, really to assess and review the current processes and to conduct a gap analysis, a gap assessment. And this phase is really important because that allows you to really design the to-be processes and to be able to design the system that will really support the end user and support the purpose. So after this design phase, we worked with the suppliers, the vendors to build and test the system and to complete all the system development. And then we started to deploy the system in the 7 sites selected. So we rolled out this 2D barcoding solution. For sure, and it's also a very important step, we conducted user training to explain to each users, you know, how to capture the information in the system, how to manage the system, etc. And then we ran the project and we ran the pilot. So with a close monitoring of the system also to be able to identify any issues we had at the beginning. I mean, like any system, when you put in place system, you cannot avoid to have issues at the beginning, but if you have a close monitoring, you are able to react very fast and not having the user very frustrated because the system is not working. So that's a very important stage also. So we have this continuous improvement and troubleshoot phase here. And at the end, after several months of usage, we conduct an evaluation just to see, okay, so what the pilot bring to the user, to the supply chain. And we agreed to extend the pilot period to really ensure that we capture more feedback, and we were able to have a very good result, and we were able to show the result really on this pilot. So what was the result? If I'm coming back to the 4 elements we saw why we need a barcode. So about the accuracy, we looked on the total number of adjustments about the transaction made across all the levels, across all these 7 sites. And during the pilot, so 223 transactions were made, and only 1 adjustment has to be made. So it's 1 of 233 transactions. So I guess we can say that the level of accuracy was very, very good, and much, much better than the level of accuracy the old paper-based process had. About efficiency, so we saw that manual entry in average took 1 minute to capture the information, to put the information in the paper, etc. With the scanner, with the barcode, the process took 18 seconds only. So that was a reduction of around 68%. And that's amazing, I guess, for me. So when you are talking with the end user, so with the people really dealing with the supply chain, with the logistics, if you told them, okay, so you will reduce your time for this very burdensome task, so it's very important, and the result was very great. About visibility and impact on operational. So we were able to get the visibility of the stocks at all levels. So, if you remember from the national to really the last mile levels. And all the system was used at 100% in all the levels. So I guess the level of usage of the system was very good, and we really see the benefits for the inventory management and for the visibility of the stock in the country for these vaccines. And for sure, data security. So we saw that all the data were stored in the same system at the central level. So we removed all the needs to copy the data from one site to another. We reduced the time and obviously the money to do the data management. And we reduced very drastically the potential security breach. So from a data security standpoint, also this system and the pilot was a great success. So that was really, really nice. And after this pilot, I think as Brian from PASS said yesterday, Pfizer agreed to conduct a second pilot. And that's what we are ongoing and what we are working to do right now. So really to deploy this system in another country and to really try to show also and to advocate that the usage of barcode can simply improve patient safety. Another example, much older, I would say, where Pfizer was participating is the Vaccine Presentation and Packaging Advisory Group. So this group was established a long time ago in 2007 by the Gavi Alliance. And really, this group was initially charged to work on the very specific vaccines. And when the WHO got the responsibility 1 year later, so we extended the scope of this group to all vaccines. And really the aim of this work group or advisory group and of the very specific working group working on barcode was really to, have a forum for the industry, for the public sector to work together to see how we can enhance the packaging and the presentation of vaccine, what we can do really to improve the traceability again, to improve the inventory management and the supply chain. So that was, I guess, a very good example of collaboration. And guess what? What was the recommendation of the group? So again, barcodes are recommended or was recommended by the group for all packaging label used by manufacturers, with the exception of the primary label, which is quite important. The recommendation was also to use GS1 standard and associated specification when we implement barcoding and information on this barcode. So, and the data, typical data, so global trade item number, lot number, expiry date. That's really the basic again, if you want to implement traceability, and the first stage is lot traceability. So again, it's, I think, a good example of how working together can really improve all the steps in the supply chain and improve patient safety. So that was a great example. So if we look on this map, so you know, it's what we have internally, what we can call the barcode landscape in what we call internally developing world or low and medium income countries. So that was the different initiatives where Pfizer were participating or are participating, but it's not really exhaustive. So I know that we have many initiatives. And really my point here is when I look on this map, it's very encouraging, but that shows me that we need to continue. We really need to have more initiatives. So we really need to move forward to really implement barcoding and implement traceability. And then for me, it's a kind of call to action, you know, for you on the room. So it's really time to partner together, both governments, but also pharmaceutical company, to really try to operationalize and to improve technology to have the most impact. So what we really need, so it's government participation. I think it's very important. It's to have an alignment between the different pharma initiatives or programs, and to have also an engagement from the alliance partner. And I think it was one of the goals of this conference, it's to have the message spread out. So we need to talk to all our partners, to all our colleagues internally, to really have this message get out and make this as a priority for all. Then, as a conclusion, for me and what we saw, really barcode technology can really increase access to vaccines and to all medicines needs for the people in all over the world. And what we like to say, safer, more efficient care starts with a simple scan. So that's really like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And Pascal will be also still available this afternoon in the Q&A session. With that, I invite the next speaker to the stage, who's coming from B. Braun, a German-based global company. And I must say that Collins, when he heard about this conference in Ethiopia, he said, I want to be part of this. So I'm very happy that you could make it, Collins. Welcome.
Good morning. Hakuna Matata. I want to say I'm really grateful for GS1 giving me this invitation to come to Ethiopia because I have a special attachment to Africa, for I am a son of Africa. So I have been working in Germany for the last 3 years, and my responsibility entailed EU FMD implementation. So I was a project lead for the last 3 years, and in the 3 years, I have managed to garner some experience that I believe can be important to us and also to different stakeholders who can be able to support the initiative of traceability and serialization for Africa. So I will take us through the agenda. I will speak briefly on company information. I will also speak about what motivates us as B. Brown to adapt the concept of serialization and traceability. I will also handle something small on the legal requirements affecting track and trace. Then I will highlight the case study of EU FMD. And because I have received a lot of questions from my fellow Africans concerning this initiative, I will try to mix around on what really we can do as Africans when we go back to our different countries. And finally, I will conclude. So, company information, as I told you, as Ulrike has clearly put it, I come from B. Brown Melsungen AG. That's the company that I work for in Germany. It's a global company, and I will highlight a few issues that are important for us in line with serialization and traceability. Okay, as a company, we stand for 3 values. One is innovation. We are a family-owned company, and innovation is a key aspect of us. We try as much as possible to talk with the pharmacies and the hospitals so that as we design innovations in our organization, we will be able to meet the requirements and the needs of our end users. Another thing that is a great value for us is efficiency. This is critical for us as a company, and I will later show you how much we have invested in research and development in the last 1 year, because we believe if we develop innovative products, they will go a long way to help the patients and also our end users at the end of the supply chain. Finally, the value that is key for us is sustainability, and it's also tied with the concept of serialization and traceability. We have a phrase in the company that sustainability means we should never lose sight of the future. If we look at the future as B. Brown, we want to see patients who are healthy. We want to see how we can help to avoid patients being at risk with our products. So this is part of us in the area of sustainability. As an organization, we have subsidiaries in 64 countries, as you can see on the board. Our headquarters is based in Melsung. Melsung is a very small village of around 12,000 people in Germany. It's near a city called Kassel. And we have production sites also in different parts of the globe. And of course, we have administrative sites. This is not clearly updated. We have Kenya, we have South Africa, we have Nigeria, we have Ghana. And so we are trying to expand gradually to see how effective we can reach out to our patients also in Africa. You can see only 2 dots are in Africa. So as an organization, it is part of our policy to see how we can spread our tentacles to effectively be represented in Africa. Our customers also value the benefits that we provide as B Brown. And just to let you know that we have 5,000 products that we produce in the pharmaceutical segment, and we also have 120,000 articles that we produce under the category of pharmaceutical products. Just to mention in this slide is that we also produce medical devices. We produce dialysis machines, we produce syringes, we produce the entire theater room. So that is also what we do as an organization. But my focus today is on pharmaceutical products in line with serialization and track and trace. So, B Brown at a glance, last year we managed to record sales of around 6.7 billion euros, and globally we are 61,000 employees. And as I had mentioned earlier, we are in 64 countries, and you can also see the amount of money that we put on research and development. Part of this money that we have invested in research and development is also tied to track and trace and the technology that we have rolled out, even though we are still a family-owned company, but this shows how serious we are moving in the area of digitalization in the pharmaceutical industry, serialization, and traceability. We also get involved in a number of corporate social responsibilities, especially in Africa. I will not highlight them at this particular function. And of course, we have some investments that we are trying to inject for the benefit of us and also of the society. So this is B Brown at a glance. This is who we are. And now I will move to the next slide. What motivates us to embrace track and trace and serialization? I told my few colleagues who I interacted with, before I joined B Brown, I was working in an oil industry. And I had the experience of serialization from an oil background, but for it is a matter of cost. But when I entered B Brown, I felt passionate to see the real picture of what is going on in the industry. How, especially in Africa, many substandard products and falsified medication are entering the African market. So to me, it was not only working for B Brown for track and trace, but I took it personally that I want to contribute something also for the African population, me being an African. So I will start with a video that will highlight my motivation and also the motivation of B Brown behind track and trace. I hope it will be clear. It's just a short video and then we will pick it up from there.
We live in a black market world. With the right money, you can buy anything.
Drugs, exotic animals, sex, and even human body parts, all sold by vast criminal networks.
One of the biggest trafficking rings in the world is something you've probably never heard of. Fake pharmaceuticals. They can look exactly like the real thing, but there's no guarantee of what's inside. Criminal gangs are ditching cocaine and heroin for fake medicine, and the profits are astronomical.
This is good as black gold.
But fake pharma is deadly. It kills 1 million people a year, and its victims are the poorest on earth.
I'm so sorry.
The trail leads me from the smuggling routes of West Africa.
Wow. These are the drugs?
Up to the highest levels of Nigerian power.
These people are very, very dangerous. They can kill if they have an opportunity.
And down to the criminal underworld of industrial China.
Globally, Africa is the last frontier, according to my experience with the last 3 years, where serialization and track and trace has not taken root properly. And I am grateful for GS1 for pushing this agenda. And I believe that you representatives of governments, representatives of organizations in Africa, and also our partners will be able to take this message home, that the time to help in the areas of traceability of farmer is now. Okay. Now, I want to ask $1 million question because I want to give some incentives maybe later on. I want a brave person to tell me one of these medicine is fake. Can you tell me which one? I want you to be careful. Just look at it easily, try to assess it. We produce this product, Propofol. Just look at it 3 seconds and then you can lift up your hands. Maybe it can be a big incentive after this presentation. Philip. Oh, sorry. Oh, no. I see. Oh, okay. 2 people. Okay, I think you can take a shot. Have you checked it clearly? Sure. Okay, you can raise up and tell the team which one is fake. So
my assumption is that the one on the left is genuine.
One on the left is genuine? Yeah.
I think unfortunately this project is not working well.
Okay.
But I think the one on the left is genuine because it seems to have a darker color. The one on the right is a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, say it again, repeat your answer.
Okay, my assumption. So the one on the left seems more genuine. The color seems a little bit darker to me.
Okay.
The vials look the same. That's the only thing. It's just the content between the active ingredient in the vial.
Yes.
And the top is where you can see some slight discoloration. And that's where I think you may be able to distinguish what is original and what is fake.
So for your case, the left is
genuine. That's my guess.
Genuine. The right is fake.
Yeah, I think it's a 50-50 guess, yeah.
I see. Now, because it's only 2 people can answer this question, so I will give my friend from Rwanda to try and answer that.
I don't know whether my eyes see clearly, but I can see, for me, both are genuine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both can be genuine. I cannot differentiate one from one another.
Mm-hmm. Clap for 2 of them. The answer, thank you very much for your contribution. The answer to this question, the first person in my many conferences that I have attended, you have got it right. The issue is unpredictability. As an end user, you cannot make the decision easily to know which one is genuine, which one is fake. And that's why track and trace and serialization is important for us. Because if this product ends up in the pharmacist, as an end user, when I receive the product from a pharmacist, I cannot make a snap decision. Only through serialization and traceability, I can make this decision. So there is a lot of unpredictability without this technology. The second motivation behind track and trace is the question, are counterfeit products produced under GMP conditions? The answer is no. The left, that is a GMP controlled environment. On the right, we have a very, very filthy environment. And this is what, these are such environments where these drugs are produced. And of course, they pose a great risk to the patients, me, you, your brother, your sister, your family members, and your friends. And the third thing is trading with counterfeit drugs, as a lot of speakers before me have said, has been known to be a profitable business. And so if you look at this picture that I obtained from one of the markets in Africa, you see that there is no channel of verifiability. The end user cannot be able to verify whether this product is genuine or not, whether it's a falsified medication or not. And so as an organization, these are some of the many factors that we have considered to implement the GS1 standards and of course serialization and traceability. So I believe these ones will be your motivation. As you go back, you need to be ready to engage the stakeholders and tell them that there is a dire need to embrace the issue of serialization and standardization by implementing the GS1 standards for traceability, as Ethiopia has done and shown us the way of how we should do it. So the next point, I will talk about the legal requirements and development of track and trace legislations. I have been involved in what is coming up in a global perspective in line with track and trace and the new legislations that are coming up. So if we look overview of main track and trace legislations and deadlines affecting B. Brown, you can see many have been talked about here, but I will single out to the EU FMD legislation that is taking effect next year in 2019, and of course Russia for 2020. You can see also Middle East and North Africa. Of course, we have Egypt, who have already brought on board their serialization requirement. And we believe that after this conference, that is our belief as we were speaking with Ulrike, that we will be receiving some requirements that will be coming from Africa. And our plea is ensure that harmonization becomes the key. Let us not go for a high, complex, own personal serialization legislation, but let us adapt a harmonization approach of what has been going on in other parts of the world, using GS1 as a standard so that it can be easy to roll out this technology in an effective manner. So as you can see also down there on the right, we have the EU requirement, which I will speak about it in my later slides. And the hotspots that are key, as I can highlight, is Europe, Russia, of course, China, as the speakers had talked about, is adapting the GS1 requirements, so that is a very big initiative. For Middle East and Africa region, for Middle East, I'm very involved in Middle East, where we have Jordan, we have Qatar, we have Bahrain, we have Saudi, and of course the UAE, that is Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Of course, they might be going the same route in the near future. We have US. For our case, we are looking at having some milestone for 2019, and of course Brazil for 2020. So track and trace at B. Brown, what do we do? We have 3 divisions in B. Brown: hospital care division, we have home care division, and we have dialysis division. And all the departments have been affected with track and trace. I will explain a little further. When I talk of track and trace, there are 5 major stakeholders who are involved in our company, and I believe even in other companies, it might be similar or the same. We have the legal department, we have the finance department, we have the global process engineering department, we have the global marketing and sales, and we have the regulatory affairs department. So these people work together because there has to be an interdependency between these issues in order for track and trace and serialization to be realized. For us in Europe, we have more than 13 sites. We have around 17 sites. We have around 54 lines that have been affected with the track and trace requirements. So we need to update our lines with scanners and the capability to print the 2D data matrix code with, of course, the given parameters. We have also to put the tamper-proof evidence on our smallest sellable unit. Articles affected in Europe alone are around 800 articles for B. Brown. And our global approach as B. Brown is that we sat with the management and we said, in order for us to continue being active in the field of traceability, we need to have a global approach. And I want to confidently tell you that we have rolled out a global plan of serialization, irrespective of if a legislation is coming or not. We have already developed a global approach. So if Africa is coming, if Ethiopia is coming, we'll just be ready for all serialized products to be brought in Africa and in Ethiopia, of course. So that is what we have done to continue with our areas of sustainability. For the EU, all countries are involved, and that is also what my colleagues are facing in other manufacturer and marketing authorization holders. So, case study, the European Falsified Medicine Directive. Before I jump into this, I will just highlight 2 points, which will be important for people who will be going back to their countries in Africa. One, as Africa, may we start the implementation in a basic way. And I mean, whenever presentations have been done here, you have been seeing a lot of IT infrastructure, and you have been asking yourself, how will we do that? As an African, I know our countries, we have problems with IT connectivity, we have problems with power, and so the basic steps of serialization and traceability should be adapted. And I know the experts that you will interact with after this day will give you more highlights, but I will mention 2. The first question, as someone who comes from any country in Africa, you need to ask yourself, do you know the source of products that come to your country? Do you have an active database in your country that you can say, in Europe, we have B. Brown, we have Pfizer, we have Bayern, we have Johnson & Johnson delivering these products to Kenya? Do you have an active database? That's a question for you. Do you know the location where these products are being manufactured from? If a product comes to the port, can you be able to pinpoint and say that this product comes specifically from this region? So we should adopt a very systematic approach in the implementation of serialization and traceability. That one will be important. The second point before I jump to my slide is kindly come up with an all-inclusive law on serialization by involving the stakeholders who have an expertise in serialization and traceability. Invite GS1 on the table. Invite the manufacturers on the table to have these discussions on a local scale. Invite the Ministry of Health. And most important, invite experts who have done this before. If Pascal has been implementing the EU FMD requirement for Pfizer for the last 5 years, invite him to come to your country in one of the sessions like this to help the Ministry of Health to know what really will be done for serialization and traceability. That is a challenge I leave for you as you will be going back to your African countries. The overview of EU FMD, it has been clearly stated what is going on. I will highlight two areas. This publication of FMD, January 2013, basically means the EU came up with a framework to see how they can develop a harmonized approach in the pharmaceutical industry. And of course, the basic thing is to ensure that from a legal supply chain, we will avoid as much as possible the re-entry of falsified medicine into a supply chain that is legal. So as a country, this is what you need to think of. How can we develop this law that will help us to tighten the loopholes that counterfeiters have been using? And as you can see, in 2015, the Delegated Act was released, and that is all about the DMC, which many speakers also have already talked about, the Data Matrix Code. And the point that we as an organization, we can see is, of course, non-compliance puts sales at risk. But also, on the other hand, if we don't comply with serialization and traceability, we put patients at risk. And this is what has been said with many speakers who have come before me. So, as you can see, track and trace for the EU FMD, Falsified Medicine Directive, is an end-to-end verification system. We start from the manufacturer, we go to the wholesaler, we go to the pharmacist, until to the patient. As I have highlighted, for Africa, we can begin in a basic step by saying we will start to put our database in our countries in order. We will start to know who are the wholesalers in our countries. Do we know them? Do we know our distributors? Are they existing? Are they genuine distributors? So those are the steps that we need to start with, even before we go for a full traceability solution. You can see there is serialization of packs with unique identifier. That is, of course, a GS1 standard that we have adopted. And of course, the anti-tampering device. It basically means that layer of like sellotape that covers a box so that people can know that this product has not been tampered with. Reporting is upload and maintain status of unique identifier in the European hub. As I told you, for us, as we start in Africa, we need to go systematically. Reporting is an advanced stage of serialization and traceability. So this slide looks a bit scary, but I will try to make it easier to understand. All manufacturers I know are very familiar with this slide. From level 1 to level 3 is more of an IT-based system. Line controllers, we have the site manager, that is more of an IT infrastructure in the line level. Number 4, level 4 is called the global enterprise. And I will tell you what that does. We have, for harmonization of process, we have 17 sites, for example, for us in Europe. Then we have this SAP ATTP that will be responsible to generate randomized serial numbers. So all our sites in Europe have been technically, IT-wise, connected to the level 4 for harmonization. So if we have a site in Ruby, which is in Spain, we know that if they want to sell serialized products in maybe Argentina, they will just put it in the SAP workflow that Argentina, and we will pick it up in Germany. We will flag that up, and we will print automatically serialized products in, we will print, of course, serialized products in Germany or in Ruby. So that is what it does. And of course, for level 5, we have our third-party portal, which is TraceLink, which is a cloud provider. It connects all our CMOs in Europe. And of course, we also have it connecting us to the EU hub. And I will mention something small. If you see 30 NMVOs, for the EU FMD implementation, all countries in the EU have an independent system called a National Medicine Verification System. For Africa, of course, every country, I suppose, will have a system of their own, a serialization law of their own. So I will highlight what steps the NMVOs and what we can learn even as we go back to our countries. So you can see the end-to-end verification system. As you can see, the hospitals and the pharmacists are connected to the National Medicine Verification System. So if we move to the next slide, this one, I will not dwell much into it because it's the process that we followed to implement the EU FMD. 2 steps are involved, administrative and technical. Through the little and the much experience I have on traceability and serialization, every country will have more or less an administrative approach and a technical approach. For example, I will take an example of Middle East countries. They have an IT interface that you are supposed to upload the master data of all the products that you supply to the Middle East. Okay? So that is more of a technical approach. Administrative approach, you need to have a contract with them. And this contract is what I told you from the beginning, that you will know if I make a contract with a country like Bahrain, the Bahrain Ministry of Health will be able to know that B. Brown exists in Germany, B. Brown's master data is this. So if any product comes from anywhere else, they will be able to know from the beginning, this might not be a product from B. Brown. So the basic steps have been taken care of. So this is something that you can adapt. As you go to brainstorm with your Ministry of Health, 2 approaches are there. 1, administrative, and 2, the technical approach. This will involve a lot of IT work, a lot of provision of master data, and the rest. So that is just on a general scale. The National Medicine Verification Organization, I will just let us understand what it entails. And let me explain it in an African context. If you are ready, like Ethiopia has given us a very good step of what they did, they will have a national system in place. And you see, for example, the national system in Germany is connected directly to the European hub. So this one is a European approach. And then you can see the European hub is directly connected to the manufacturers and to the parallel distributors. So for our case, the first thing that we'll start with is, of course, to know that our approach mostly will be national, because we will involve our national stakeholders, the Ministry of Health, GS1 in different countries in Africa, the manufacturers who are either importing or manufacturing locally in those countries. So as you can see, one thing that I did is I need to receive a contract from a country like Belgium, like France, like Germany. So the first step is maybe an MOH from Nigeria will issue a contract or a document or a legislation for the manufacturers to see. So there is an issue of, the second point is legal review. For us internally as a manufacturer, we need to look and see, is there some legal issues on this contract that can affect our business approach? For you in Africa, when you release a legislation for the stakeholders, they have to review it to see whether it is something that maybe adapts the GS1 standards or is creating a harmonized approach that can be easily adapted by the manufacturers. The third thing is contract is signed. This is what I told you, it's more of an administrative approach before we go to a technical approach. So we receive the contract, we review it, and then Bahrain tells us, before we access your system, you need to sign a contract with us. And that contract, of course, is a one-time contract. Another thing is a fee has to be paid, and this fee, according to what I have seen in Europe and in other areas of the world, is basically for setting up the administrative framework of how the national systems will operate. And finally, the technical connectivity. This is basically for us manufacturers to implement. So we have, as all the speakers have said, IT-wise, we need to be prepared. Technological-wise, in the engineering perspective, we need to be prepared. So if you are to adapt this system back in Africa, look at it in those two approaches. There needs to be an administrative approach where the contract is available, where the contract will be discussed with the stakeholders, where you will get the opinions of the stakeholders, and then after that, you will release it now for implementation by the manufacturers and other stakeholders. I will highlight the challenges. This is my last slide of what we faced in EU FMD implementation. First of all is time. Don't underestimate traceability and serialization. If you are to begin this process, you need to begin now. You need to go back to your countries and take the message. Many GS1 groups have been represented here from African countries. Take the message in the doorsteps of the Ministry of Health. Take to the other stakeholders that are involved in pharmaceuticals and medical devices in your country, that the time to start is now. A little shame of the statistics is Africa being the last frontier for this. So we have lagged behind in areas of serialization and traceability. So kindly take back the message that something has to be done, and it has to be done now. The second thing that you will face is inadequate resources. I think many companies here have faced the same issue. One, track and trace experts are few. That is a general thing that we are battling with even right now in our company. We have a team of around 8 experts, and we have others who we have brought from different areas to work on part-time, because full-time experts for track and trace are few. That is a general issue. Then there is heavy financial expectation. And as I told you, for Africa, if we are to start in a basic way, we will avoid heavy financial expectations, because I want to give you a clear picture of what was the financial expectation on our side. For EU alone, we as a company, we have invested 15.5 million euros to implement the EU FMD, 15.5 million euros. And for every year in the EU, we as a company, we will be paying 700,000 euros every year. So the financial expectation is big. So for Africa, we can begin a little bit basic and less. and less, without much effort on technicality, so that we can reduce as much as possible the financial expectation. The third thing is contractual agreements. There is a lot of effort in this. Kindly involve the stakeholders from the beginning. If you don't do that, you will develop a contract. When you bring it to the manufacturers, it might not have a harmonized approach, and there might be some pushback from the stakeholders, because we are looking at a global approach of implementing serialization and traceability that will help us as much as possible. The fourth challenging area is the IT environment. Creating a harmonized approach is quite challenging. And as you have seen in all the presentations, is that they have several contract manufacturers, they have several sites across different places of the world. So track and trace, for your information, is anchored on two things. One is IT, two is engineering. The other is administrative. So serialization and traceability runs on these two platforms, IT and engineering. So that's the kind of challenges also we faced as an organization to implement this. And finally, we as an organization, we need to bring our wholesalers on board. That is the same plea that I have had for you, that our wholesalers in Europe, we have to connect them to the national systems for the sake of accountability and to fulfill the end-to-end verification system. So this was a huge task because also of harmonization of the process. So my last slide, I will leave us with this. Interconnectivity is the key when it comes to track and trace. One, involve the stakeholders. Two, bring in the experts to advise you on how this can be done. Three, the time to start is now. Four, as you can look at the board, you can see all these experts are involved in B. Brown alone to ensure that serialization and traceability in a global scale has been fulfilled. So I believe that this is the way to go, and you will be able to appreciate that you have a lot of work on your table, but you have GS1 and many experts who are seated here to help Africa in this journey. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Collins, for your really good suggestions and recommendations. We will shift gears now a little bit. Traceability is not happening without the people who are dealing with the patients, right, with the hospitals. So we will now concentrate a little bit on the hospital side. And the hospitals are also those who are putting requirements out to their manufacturers. They are the customers, and we have seen that two things are really moving the world. It's either regulatory requirements or it's the customer. And I'm very glad that we have somebody here from South Africa, and I invite Caroline Potgieter from Netcare to the stage. And I can tell you from a global level, we have heard a lot about what you are doing in South Africa and a lot of impact.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. So I'm just going to touch quickly on who Netcare is. We're a network of private hospitals in the South African environment. We have 52 hospitals, 9,530 registered beds at those hospitals. We have an arm of our business called Medicross. They're a primary healthcare, occupational health, and employee wellness service provider. We have our emergency services, Netcare 911, and we have our national renal care, which is our dialysis service. So our project, we started talking about this project in 2015, and Netcare's endgame is we want to be able to scan anything that moves in, around, or out of our hospital. We're not stopping at our medical devices and our medicines. We want to be able to scan from our toilet paper right up to our very expensive capital equipment. So in 2015, we started our internal discussions, and in 2015, we made our first mistake. We, as the South Africans, have produced two really great sprinters, Caster Semenya and Wade van Niekerk. And as a proudly South African company, we tended to think we have the inheritability to sprint, and we set ourselves a 2-year deadline. The South African industry does not have a regulated requirement currently for GTIN. So in our world, based on the number of transactions and number of movements, we've put our initial phase into focusing on capturing and identifying the product. Subsequent phases, we will work on scanning and tracking of batch lot and expiry, and then we're going to go into serialization and loan sets. So we started our project in January 2016 with engagement of our suppliers, and it was at this point we realized, oh my, we are very naive. So we turned to our suppliers and we said to them, each one of you have a unique challenge. Give us a plan. Come back to us with a plan and indicate in your plan your timelines, your challenges, and how we can assist you. We've had a lot of support from GS1 South Africa. And if I give you one recommendation today, is you cannot do this alone. Involve your local GS1 office is very important. Okay. So I'm just going to touch on some of the challenges we've experienced. So the first one is because we don't have a regulatory requirement and there's no regulated timelines yet, we have the inability in the private healthcare environment to draw a line in the sand and say you will be compliant by a certain time. Some of those supplier plans we saw, they had a 6-month, 1-year, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan. Some suppliers still haven't come back to us. Okay. So how do we influence this in our environment? How do we drive compliance? We had to sit down and had a look. So in one place we can do this is in our tender environment and our formulary environment. We have a product ranking system. So very often we'll come out, we'll have 2 products, very similar, in the same category, very similar pricing, and we would probably in that case award a first ranking status to both of those products. In our environment, we do not require a site to have 100% compliance to a first ranked product. We allow them a small percentage for doctor preference and for those scenarios outside of what they are able to comply, but we do track and monitor their compliance. So we made the decision, instead of having 2 products ranked number 1, we're going to give preference in that scenario to the product who has the GTIN, and the product that doesn't gets the rank 2. And we put that out there to market. And obviously people started to see us implementing it, and it started to drive compliance. Now, because we are 2 years down the line on our project, one of the things we could draw the line on, and for 6 months we communicated this, is we have a centralized process when you are introducing new technology into our environment. And we said from 1 February 2018, no new technology without a GTIN. Sorry. Apologies, my mouth, this is dry. So another challenge we experience in the South African market, 80% of our product is imported. And this is actually part of where our naivety came from, because we could see in our theatres, in our wards, we could see so many products had the 2D data matrix on it. So how hard can it be to do this? What we didn't realize is we're dealing with one supplier in South Africa who is importing potentially from 5 different countries. And there's not always a legal requirement or a regulatory requirement in each of those countries for the GS1 standard. So we're starting to see barcodes from other standards coming into our market. So we made a decision because we didn't want to stall our project. And part of our project is looking at our processes, and it's very important. GS1 gives you the ability to track and trace, but you need to look at your IT, your technology, and your process and how you get this and how you get around what you want to do and make it the most efficient way. So we said to our suppliers, right, we're going to ask you to give us, we took a multi-barcoding approach. Give us whatever barcode you have, and we're going to ask you over time to become GS1 compliant. So we can validate with GS1 what is GS1 compliant. And I have a portion in my database which is not GS1 compliant. What has happened is we're finding more and more people as GS1 is growing globally, we are finding more and more of these products are coming in with perhaps sometimes 2 barcodes on. We're then converting to the GS1. We've done change management with our staff, how to identify what is GS1 and what is not. Okay. So my next one is where I get to climb on my soapbox. So many of the presentations are talking here about end-to-end traceability, but you're stopping when you're delivering your stock to the pharmacy or the medical facility. And that's the start of our world. The collaborations that are being spoken about, no one's involving the hospitals. This is rolling more and more out into the hospitals, and I'm asking you if you're going to do collaboration, and please, it's very important, involve the hospitals, because our processes at the end of the day need to implement this. True end-to-end track and traceability is when I issue that item, that medicine to the patient. It's not when it hits my pharmacy. So we have 2 scenarios with what we experienced in the following challenge. Is we have suppliers who can only issue to us at a secondary, have a 2D data matrix at a secondary packaging level. Our one scenario, which was mostly medical device manufacturers, what they did is in their information systems, they only carried it to secondary packaging, but in our world, when we opened the box, we could see the primary packaging had the 2D data matrix. But they had taken their information and gone to their global offices and said, please publish this set of GTINs to the South African market, and they published it to our Netcare GLM. So we went back to the manufacturers, we had to re-educate them. Some of them, we scanned the products, we gave them the codes, we said, there's our primary codes, can you validate them with your international office and publish through? So we're starting to see more and more in the medical devices of primary packaging. But in our medicine side, we don't. So medication that is dispensed by the pharmacy and a direct dispensing, secondary packaging, 100%. But in our world, in an emergency trolley, in ward stock, in our ambulances, we are not carrying that secondary packaging. It's simply a space issue. We do not have large storerooms. So we need to drive, please, a 2D data matrix symbol on a primary packaging as far as possible. It's very important in our world. As more and more hospitals go on board, please, you need to consider this. So our next steps. Firstly, our success. As of yesterday morning, 32,777 GTINs have been published on the South African GDSN to the Netcare GLM. This could not have been achieved without the phenomenal support of GS1 South Africa, Michelle and her team, continuous engagement with our suppliers. They've been out to our warehouses, they've been out to factories. It's been phenomenal, the support we've been given. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so our next step is we're at infancy stage. We're just trying to understand serialization. So in South Africa, there has been a draft document published about future regulations, and they're looking at the date of 2022 for serialization. We need to start now. We need to build our systems now, our processes now to accommodate for this. We don't want to wait till 2020 when we've hopefully matured enough on onboarding our suppliers and getting our GTINs and scanning properly on the identification side. So we're really at infancy stage. We're feeling very overwhelmed. And I've learned so much in this conference on serialization. Thank you to those who've presented on the topic. Another area where we're having to park this for a little while, we're going to have to do supplier engagement and workshops with our suppliers, is in the orthopedic world, our loan sets. You receive a set with thousands of items, instrumentation. It goes through sterilization processes at very high temperatures. Is we still need to get our head around how we're going to do this with these products. So they are global through GS1. There have been global conversations. It's not a South African phenomenon. And we're going to workshop in the South African environment with our suppliers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. And who knows me a little bit knows that's also my soapbox. Rob is laughing because I'm a hospital pharmacist. I've worked very long in a hospital. And I believe that really for bedside scanning and preventing medication errors, we will need identification on the primary packaging level. And I think companies are moving there. It's just sterilization is the first step to be done. And I think then companies will move to the identification really on the level which is going to the patient. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I invite Fergal to the stage. Fergal is a long time involved with GS1. He's also one of the healthcare leadership team tri-chairs. So he has a world of experience, and I promise you, you will not be bored when he's speaking.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much, and thank you to GS1 for inviting me here. I must say I'm honoured to be here as a healthcare provider to do what we do and to be able to spread our message. I think it's absolutely amazing. So thank you all for being here on a Thursday morning. I can't believe there are so many people here. The only problem with these microphones is they make you sound like you've been drinking honey wine all night. So you'll have to excuse me for that. So I know I'm standing between you and coffee break, so this is what I'm proposing to cover in the next 3 hours. I think I have to do this. So you've heard all week about GS1 standards, and they are the language for communication to make sure that we all communicate properly and everything that we say is understood by who we're speaking to. So I have a short video which shows you what can happen if you don't communicate properly. Sound?
Ja,
Sorry.
das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Überlebensradar.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
So, thank you. You've been a beautiful audience. So that's all I need to say, really. Okay, so that was the fun part. This is the serious part. So we all may die from a disease which is sometimes unavoidable, but to die from the medication that you're taking is frankly unacceptable. And we would all agree to that. So why do people die from medication? We've heard from Collins and from other people today, and it has been covered extensively about counterfeit medication. But believe it or not, it is possible to die from medication that you're meant to take because you've been given the wrong dose or the wrong medication, even though that it's not counterfeit. Again, we saw this morning the quiz, which of these is counterfeit? Now, here the answer is neither of them are counterfeit. The issue here is that the difference between the strength of these two medications is dictated by a very pale shade of blue. The guy in the corner is a famous American actor called Dennis Quaid, and he had newborn twins who were premature. They needed this medication to flush out their lines, to keep their lines clear so that they could get the medication injected into those lines. The problem is that one of those is 1,000 times stronger than the other. So what happened was that in an ICU in the middle of the night, a nurse picked up the stronger dose, cleared the lines with that dose, it got into their bloodstream, and both the children almost bled out because it's an anticoagulant or something that's meant to keep your blood from clotting. So thankfully, both kids were okay, but since then, this actor has been a strong advocate of medicine safety. And imagine if you could have scanned those barcodes, which would have told you that this strength is not suitable for this patient. There was no barcodes on that medication. Our own case in Ireland was that we were giving patients a medication and it became contaminated. We didn't know where it was in the supply chain, and although it was a genuine medicine, it had become contaminated, and we weren't able to recall it because we couldn't track and trace that medication. So what this story I'm going to tell you, and while it relates to specifically to hemophilia, you could bring it back and apply it to any other medication that needs to go through the supply chain to the patient's home, and that's what happens with our medication. Ireland is a relatively small country. There's a smaller country just off our coast called Great Britain, but we don't like to talk about that. Thank you. We have a national centre for haemophilia, but those patients, once they're diagnosed, they move to any part of the country and the service needs to be provided to them, and the medication goes to them as well. So what is haemophilia? Well, really, at its most basic, it's a protein that you need in your blood in order for it to clot. And if you think of it like a domino effect, when we move our elbows and our joints, we all bleed into those joints. That's not a problem because we have a number of proteins, and the first time a vessel breaks, then that sets off what's called a cascade or a domino effect. So there's a number of factors in this cascade. If you're suffering from hemophilia, halfway down that cascade, the domino, when it falls, the other domino is missing. So you continue to bleed and continue to bleed until the pressure from the vessel outside and inside equalizes, and then eventually it will stop. It's hereditary. The incidence is the same worldwide, and it's easily treated by taking a medication prophylactically, which means taking it twice or 3 times a week. If you don't have access to this medication or you don't take it, you can see here, these patients, these young boys have what's called hemarthrosis. We would all bleed into our joints just as they do, but our bleeds will stop. Unfortunately, they don't have access to the medication, therefore the bleed continues. So why I'm speaking to you today is that at one stage, we as healthcare providers thought we had a silver bullet for treating this condition. It was realized that you could take plasma from a lot of donors, lyophilize it, freeze it, and then allow the patients to self-medicate in their home. It was much better for the patients. They didn't have to come to hospital. But the problem was that that medication became infected with HIV and hepatitis. Worse still, that even though we knew it was infected, it was in the supply chain, but we didn't know where in the supply chain it was. Therefore, patients were infecting themselves, our parents were infecting their children with HIV and hepatitis, even after a recall had been initiated. So that gave us, the hospital was given a source of funding then to start this project in order to improve how we dealt with these patients and how we got the medication to those patients. So we had a number of problems, and they were really that, first of all, identifying the medication, it didn't have a barcode. Secondly, when the patients got the medication, to be compliant with scanning that medication, they were meant to fill in that pink sheet that you see there. On the other side, the patients also had to come up to the local treatment center to collect the medication, or they had to get it delivered by parcel post or by train or by taxi, which was inefficient and also outside the cold chain that the medication was meant to be kept in. And of course, that was an increased risk to the patients. So these patients are taking the medication from birth, so it's important that they take it all the time from when they're born. So we decided to look at the supply chain, look at care delivery, and put the patient in the middle and build everything around that. And what we did then was that we could have built this quite easily by moving everything using track and trace, paper-based. The problem, and it would work quite well. I'm sorry, the mic seems to be cutting out, but we decided to use GS1 identifiers layered on top of what we were, of our process, and that is allowed us to achieve additional benefits and additional safety for the patients. So in practical terms, where does GS1 fit in our systems? So the manufacturers are now, because of legislation mainly, applying a GS1 identifier to the medication. Before they did that, we contracted our cold chain logistics company to do that for us, so they would overlabel. At that point then, all medication has a GS1 identifier. The cold chain distributor rewrote their warehouse management system in order to be able to capture GS1 identifiers and also produce GS1 identifiers for any medication that didn't have a barcode. Within the hospital, we track and trace the medication using a specific system that was built for us, but we also modified our electronic patient record to be able to accept that information. Patient home, in order to be able to identify uniquely where this medication is going anywhere in Ireland, we needed what's called a GLN, or a global location number, supplied by GS1. That is produced by the electronic patient record when a patient registers, and then given to the logistics company, who use that then so that they know exactly where to deliver the medication. And then finally, that I'll touch on later, we developed an app along with the patients, a patient focus group, which allows the patients to scan the medication before they take it. So we're quite lucky, if you could call having hemophilia lucky, but you're quite lucky insofar as the supply chain for this medication is quite straightforward. There's no grey market, there's no black market, there's no counterfeit. So it really goes from the manufacturer to our National Blood Centre, then to the hospital, and then to the patient's home. The problem with that is that, and it was mentioned earlier, it was paper-based. So therefore, you weren't getting the data when you needed it, you didn't know where it was, and then compliance for the patient with recording their usage was also retrospective, incomplete, and international studies show that it's usually less than 50% compliance with recording medication. We've heard this throughout this conference, and I think this is the key to it. You need to be able to identify whatever it is that you're tracking, in our case medication, capture it once, and then share it everywhere. Share it for the supply chain, but also share it into your clinical information systems, because it has added value by doing that. Also, you've seen this a lot through, but just to reinforce this is what we asked for. Now, we started in 2005, and in 2010, we started using a data matrix. So what do we need? Well, we need the name of the product, we need the expiry date, we need the batch number, and the serial number. And those are all within that barcode. And the reason it's a small data matrix is that if it was a linear barcode, it would be that length to have that information. But with a data matrix barcode, it can be much smaller. It fits in the secondary package. It allows us to scan it through the supply chain, from the manufacturer right to the patient. So where do we need to scan? We need to capture it within the hospital, but more importantly, the majority of our medication goes directly to the patient. They don't come near the hospital. They get their prescriptions electronically, and the cold chain distributor then on a weekly or a monthly basis delivers the medication to the patients. But it also, if they come in for treatment, for knee replacement, for dental work, anywhere where a patient is prone to bleed, we need to supply it there as well. Within the hospital, again, we have a system that does that for us. So the product is delivered to us. It goes into the central reception area, which is a GLN. It's scanned from that into an inpatient or an outpatient GLN or ward area. Then it's allocated to the patient, scanned to the patient, and given to the patient. And then the data from that can go into an electronic patient record, but also back to the supply chain company in order for them to be able to restock, do the forecasting, and to make sure that they have enough medication in stock for the patient. If we had to do a recall within the hospital for a patient, this is what we used to base it on, and I'm sure a lot of hospitals around the world still use this. So we've been able to move from that to this so that at a touch of a button, in real time, we can tell where the medication is, how much of it is there, what the expiry date is. And so that gives our hemovigilance nurse really good visibility. But the most important thing for us and for the patients was their own safety when they're taking the medication at home. And because of that, with a patient focus group, with an app development company, and with ourselves in the hospital, what we did was we developed an app, and we used the acronym KISS, and we've heard about that before, which is keep it simple, stupid, because all the patients want to do is take their medication. They want to have the least number of interactions necessary, but the maximum safety. So each patient who has hemophilia has an ID card in Ireland. They're issued with this card and has their unique identifier, which again is a GS1 identifier. So they simply scan that, and that confirms that it's a certain patient, and it also confirms what medication they're on. The reason that we do that is you might have two boys in a family who have hemophilia but are on different medications because one might be allergic to one, so you want to make sure you're giving the right medication to the right patient. They then can check their stock. The stock that has been delivered to their home is downloaded onto that app, and that gives them visibility of what exactly they have in their refrigerator. But the most important part is when they want to scan their medication. They simply scan the barcode on the medication, and that does a number of really important checks for the patient. First of all, from the barcode, it checks the GTIN against their prescription to make sure that it is their medication. It checks the expiry date and alerts them, and also alerts the treatment center by email if they're attempting to take expired medication. It checks the recall status, which is built into the system, so if a medication has been recalled, they will get an alert on their app to say, don't take this medication. And also it checks the expiry date, it's for a second time. And the reason for that is that when they get the medication, they're not IT or supply chain professionals, so they may not rotate their stock and put the longest dated stock at the back of the fridge. So they may just continue taking stock at the front of the fridge, which means whatever's at the back may expire. Now you may say, so what, a little expired stock? The issue we have is that we have approximately 200 patients in Ireland with hemophilia, but the cost to us for that is about $60 million for 200 patients. So it's a really expensive medication. So it's a life-saving medication, but in order for us to provide the service, we have to make sure that we're efficiently giving that medication to the patients, and the patients are aware that it is very important also. The scanning process is quite simple. Once they have scanned the medication, they get green for go or red for stop. And then when they press finish, that information is then transmitted electronically back So, and also the patients, instead of having to fill in a compliance sheet, they're able to go onto a secure web portal and check their own data to see what they have, what they've scanned recently, and bring that to their care provider for their next appointment. At the same time, the care provider is also getting a copy of that. And that's what I say. So that goes into their electronic patient record. So when they go and sit with their care provider, they can see the number of bleeds they've had in a specific area. As you can see, this would not be possible without scanning the barcode. And it's as simple as scanning the barcode, and that's what's required. Some of the benefits have been interesting for us, both intended and unintended. First of all, of course, we have a recall, and we can recall every vial of medication within 10 minutes in Ireland. But not only that, we can also identify that there is substitute medication for the patient to take, because there's no point in recalling it and saying you're fine if you don't give them something to take, because they could bleed to death otherwise. Anyway, timeliness of infusion. Because this product has a half-life, which means once it goes into the body, it starts to degrade straight away. Patients are meant to take it first thing in the morning, but we would notice the hemovigilance nurse was able to see one patient in particular was taking it last thing at night. So you need to take it when you're active. So while he was sleeping, he was completely covered for a bleed, which was fantastic. But the next day, he had less of this protein in his body. And if he did bleed, then he would get a breakthrough bleed. If he did that, he needed more medication. If he needed more medication, it cost more money. So we were able to make savings that way. Again, we had one mum who was infusing 2,000 units for an ankle bleed for her kids instead of 1,750. That costs more money, then it's more money to the service. The less amount of product they take would cover for the bleed, but it just meant that we were making savings and she was able to manage the kids at the same time. There's automatic compliance, which I've covered. Real-time alerts. So some injuries that patients get that they may have to take the medication would be a head bleed or a tongue bleed in the event of a child. Lots of children bite their tongues, and you never know about it. But if a child with hemophilia bites their tongue, it's actually very distressing, and they continue to bleed, and they continue to bleed. So if they also, as well as scanning the medication, they can say why they're taking it. There are drop-down menus saying, I had a severe bleed in my left ankle, and if they choose one of those severe bleed sites, then we get an alert in the treatment center. The nurse can ring the patient to make sure they're okay, and we can have a quick follow-up. And of course, patient empowerment. And studies show that patients that are involved in their own care, their outcomes are improved. We were also able to get significant decrease in medication consumption. Not exclusively because of the barcode scanning, but from aggressive tendering that we do with the manufacturers, but also from the cold chain supply company. And they have been able to take a corrective action for patients who are over-ordering by informing the centre, and then the coagulation centre or the treatment centre can ring the patients and let them know that they will get enough medication so they don't overstock and the medication doesn't go out of date. So where are we with our system? So to date, the product comes from the manufacturer. It comes into the cold chain logistics company. From there, it goes to either the hospital or the patient home. And then finally, the patient has the final security of scanning using the app. But the trick in this is that if you're using a standard barcode, such as a GS1 barcode, it doesn't matter who you're getting the medication from. You know that that barcode can be used in all your IT systems. If you were using a proprietary system, then it would mean that if one company was using one barcode, another, then your systems, IT systems, scanners may not be able to scan that information. So the key is your solution providers to be GS1 compliant, which is critical because GS1 standards are absolutely fantastic. But if they're not in systems, then they're absolutely useless. So my message to you is to make sure that all your solution providers become aware of GS1. And again, it's been said so many times, talk to your local your local MO, your GS1 MO. Allow them to become part of your tender process. Make sure that when you're tendering, that you're saying, are you GS1 compliant? Prove it that you're GS1 compliant, because a lot of suppliers will say, yeah, we're GS1 compliant, but what they mean is they can scan a barcode. They mightn't be able to capture the lot number, the serial number, the expiry date. So you need to raise awareness and also work with GS1 to make sure that they're part of your team. So it's been said many times also, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. We started in 2003, believe it or not, and we were using linear barcodes, 2 linear barcodes in order to get the information. We moved on then to a data matrix code, 2006, and since then we've been incrementally adding to what we do, putting the information into information systems, and also then putting all that data back into our electronic patient record. So as you can see, it's taken a long time. It is a marathon, but it is doable. We're not using the full suite of GS1 standards. We're not using GDSN, but we are using things like GLN and GTIN. But within our hospital, we do have other projects where we are using GDSN for supply chain, and we're also using other identifiers for our surgical instrument track and trace. So we're slowly building and using GS1, and GS1 is a tool. It's not a solution. Okay, you have to remember that you won't get a box saying this will solve all your problems, but you will get a very important tool that can be used with other systems in order to improve patient safety. So this we did, and what was talked at this morning, we also did a vaccine pilot, and it was really well received by all the stakeholders. Of course, it's obvious. I mean, the benefits are they speak for themselves. And these are what people said about it. That was fantastic. They were very sorry that the pilot stopped. And again, it's trying to get engagement with both your Department of Health, but also your National Immunization Office to get them aware of the power of vaccines, and then build on that and use the expert knowledge. Again, it was mentioned this morning that is in this room to help you build that knowledge so that you can get to where you want to be. So the bottom line is that, these standards can help save lives. It is a simple scan. It can do so much. These are the lucky guys that have access to a secure supply chain, have access to safe medication, and they can live, and they know that they will live a full life. So what I would say is that use the standards, use the knowledge that's here, and start simple, keep it simple, start small, look for your low-hanging fruit, and build from there. So thank you very much.
I know that you all are hungry for coffee, so thank you very much, first of all, Fergal, for this very inspiring journey which you described. You are available for questions as well as Carolyn in the coffee break, but also in this afternoon. With that, can I ask everybody to be back in 35 minutes, so have the coffee break a little bit shorter, that we still keep on time and you all can go home on time. Thank you very much. Enjoy the coffee, the famous Ethiopian coffee.
GS1 staff, if GS1 staff could please come to the stage. Could GS1 staff please come to the stage?
Here's Michelle. Wait for Michelle. Some on stage, some behind. There's Michelle. Yay, here you are.
Everybody.
If you want to join,
Oh, okay. So where are we looking at? This way or this way? This way. One for the ditch. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, everybody.
We are in the home run. If we can all take a seat again, please. Okay, we are moving back to Ethiopia, our host country. And while we don't have yet an implementation of GS1 standards here in hospitals, we nevertheless have a speaker from a hospital here, from the St. Paul's Hospital Millennium Medical College in Ethiopia here. And he will talk where he sees the possible benefits of track and trace. And thank you, Elisa, you just reminded me before I call you to stage. Yesterday there was a wooden ring found in the room. So if you miss a wooden black ring, please approach Elisa, who's just raising her hand, okay? So with that, I invite, and I try your name, Cal. You said I could say Cal, but Kalgidan Gebretsadik, who's the operational manager of the hospital, to talk about where he sees the benefits Ethiopia could have from track and trace. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be speaking on the GS1 African Healthcare Conference. So if anyone is wondering why I look like the youngest presenter here, it's probably because you're in Ethiopia and we're still in 2010. I'm not supposed to exceed 15 slides, so I would have put some more slides to give you some insight into St. Paul's. But since I don't have them, I'll just tell you what it is. So this is our logo here, and St. Paul's is the second largest hospital in the country, which is also a medical college, which has 3 major wings and dealing with the clinical, the academic and research, as well as the administrative side. And we're now approaching a huge number of increment in medical services, as well as academic and research parameters. There are also a number of undergraduate and postgraduate programs that are being given by St. Paul. So I work for an office called Office of Innovative Strategies and Operations, which has been running a year by now, and it's one of those unique offices where you're not going to find in any kind of governmental hospital. We just started it to streamline our strategic implementations of any kind of department and working towards innovative ideas and to bring those ideas to be more efficient. So let me start with the one-word challenge. So this is by far, I mean, the last presentation. I'm sure you've got a lot of insight into the current supply chain system. But if you were to describe the supply chain system of Ethiopia, I'm saying Ethiopia because it would be somewhat similar to most of the African countries. But if you were to describe it in one word, what would it be? We have amazing over here. Okay. Any other? All right. Okay. We'll be developing. Okay, that's a better term. Okay. I was looking for something that falls in between positive and negative, and developing is actually a better way to go. All right, so I'm just going to start with a few current stats so that you have an understanding of as a hospital's perspective. By the way, I didn't mention that I modified the topic to mean to bring you the perspective of a hospital working in Ethiopia and where we stand in the supply chain. So PFSA is by far the largest single supplier of pharmaceuticals to most of the healthcare facilities in Ethiopia, and It has now listed a comprehensive list of more than 1,100 medical equipment, more than close to 1,000 medical supplies, and close to 1,000 lab reagents. And it's made to provide these. This is just the comprehensive list, and whoever requests it from this list is supposed to get it ideally. So I'm just quoting, I mean, one of the data that I found from last Ethiopian fiscal year. We do have an influx of pharmaceuticals that are donated. As you know, donations are actually not something that you request per se, and not something that you would choose to get, but anyways, they get donated. And just to give you a figure, it's around 5.17 Ethiopian billion birr just in 1 year. And apart from that, 6.8 billion of Ethiopian billion birr was supplied by PFSA in the last fiscal year. Although that if you see the numbers that are actually distributed, it might be even bigger than this. So these are all inculcating into the healthcare facilities. All the figures that you see here are supposed to go into the final setup where you meet the patients, and these are supposed to be used for the healthcare, for the betterment of health in the healthcare facilities. So let me go to the next slide. And so this is a stat that I recently found. We have close to 302 hospitals in the country. These are just the number of hospitals, although we have a larger number of healthcare facilities, whether they're health centers or health posts, that are supposed to be decentralized so that they're closer to our community. And they're actually supposed to be the first stop shops for our community, especially in the districts. And why I'm mentioning this is St. Paul is just one of these hospitals. And the reason I'm giving you these figures is to just give you the know-how, I mean, the highlight of what's happening with all the pharmaceuticals that are being given. So I consider the title that I'm supposed to present here today as the meaning of all of the 3 days, because when we talk about the technicalities, track and trace, it all comes down to the patient. There is a general assumption that all that we do good during the process of supply chain will stay good, although that assumption is wrong. There is a number of mishaps that go around even after you successfully bring that product to the healthcare facility, because that is the point where actually the patient is supposed to get it. Any kind of mishaps here will actually multiply all the efforts by 0. So that's why I'm just giving you the data. So this by far was the previous figures, just I mentioned with the imported and supplied pharmaceuticals. But our pharmaceutical market in Ethiopia is supposed to rise to close to $1 billion by the year of 2020, and that's just 2 years from now. Pharmaceutical market would include the local manufacturers, the importing, and the actually the pharmaceuticals that are supplied by PFSA as well. So it's going to be a growing market, and we have to be ready for a robust. So I'm just going to share you some very few national targets that have been kept by, that are being worked on by the Ministry of Health and PFSA, which are relevant to hospitals. One of the issues that we have at hospitals of trying to acquire pharmaceuticals is our order fill rate. That's what do you call the order fill rate is whatever you request, you have to get as long as you requested it in the right conditions and using the right evidence-based decision-making process. So order fill rates are supposed to be met 95% of the time. So order fill rate should be 95%. These are the targets that is put out by PFSA, our largest contributor, supplier of medical supplies. 60%, that's what the target is for essential drugs from local manufacturers, so that the inbound, the inward capacity of the country is going to be enabled. And we expect essential drug availability in all healthcare facilities 100%. So this is why we need a robust and a very strong track and trace system. So don't forget the assumption that I told you earlier about all that we talked about these 3 days will come in vain if we do not act on this point. I'm sure the hospital is supposed to be like the grassroots of all the levels that we talked about during the earlier presentations, but it is the most important. So I'm just going to mention some bare minimum standards that we have kept by the ministry. Any kind of care facility is supposed to have minimum requirements. There has been a guideline that was set and updated a few years ago, the Ethiopian Hospital Services Transformation Guidelines, and they have 20 chapters allocated to each service: pharmaceutical services, laboratory services, radiology, patient flow, facility management, and pharmacy is just one of them. And I just picked two of one of the chapters, two listings. These are supposed to be the minimum. There was an initiative which was actually a flagship program by the ministry that was started a few years ago and is now being practiced in over 126 health facilities. It's called APTS. Why I'm mentioning this is it is actually logically in line with the current track and trace system that we've been speaking about. So APTS, which is Auditable Pharmaceutical Transactions and Services, is supposed to have you encode your products. It's supposed to have you record, document, and report each step of the transaction within the healthcare facility, even to the patient. And you're supposed to generate data and report the data according to the monthly schedule. So this is in line because this is already being practiced. Although in many of the centers it's manual, there are some centers that have actually automated it. And why I'm mentioning this again is it's actually in line with the track and trace system and the principles of global standards. The next is availing or using an inventory management tool. So what I mean by minimum standards is if you find a facility without these two, basically it's not supposed to have, it's not assumed that it's giving the best standard care. And these are the best minimum, I mean the bare minimum, because you can go further and automate and make the inventory management tool, you can automate it. That is as per your resources that you can avail. So basically what happens to a product when it comes to the hospital is you have to receive it. I'm just collecting some of the steps so that it's easier. So you have to receive it, request it, and when it's requested by a department, you have to issue it. All these processes require documentation and reporting, It has to be accompanied, it's accompanied in every step. Although it's done manually these days, I mean, in most of the healthcare facilities, which takes a tremendous amount of time, it is actually what's required. Before you automate anything, and I think I can be backed up by IT solution providers here, if there is no clear flow of any manual system, you can't just directly automate it. You have to have a clear system, you have to have a need assessment, readiness assessment, and then you have to have a clear way of the data that is supposed to follow each sequence. So what a track and trace system would provide in this receiving and issuing step would be product authentication and tracking. Why I'm mentioning this here is there are a number of incidents in the hospitals, especially in the stores, that's basically doing the receiving of the pharmaceuticals, because they receive it in bulk. There is actually a time lapse between your receiving of the product and you finding out that there's a problem with the product. And that is almost always dependent on the person that's receiving it. Because if they're careful, more cautious, you kind of find out that there are a number of issues with some of the products that we receive that have been trusted to have successfully gone through all the process of track and trace. At this point, you may find out that the vials may have turned turbid. You find out that some of the syrups have been broken. You find out that there are some clear, visible differences between what is assumed to be the same product. If it passes this step, the next step would be the department. And that would very well mean the patient. So in this step, a track and trace system, if strong, could actually direct you and identify or authenticate a product. This would be the spot. The next would be, so after the patient, it's received, it's actually dispensed in the dispensing area. So I divided dispensing and administering, but it's basically the same thing. Why I divided it is because in the hospital, you have actually these two sequences where dispensing could mean to a patient that is an outpatient, who you may very well no longer see after you dispense that patient, and may very well cannot track after he takes the medication. There are a number of incidences in hospitals, even outside of St. Paul's, that have been not reported, but that have been documented, where product misplacement and mistakes in dispensing have resulted in adverse events, catastrophic events. And in these sequences, I mean, if the product identification spot could be done here, imagine a simple scan avoiding all these conditions in this step as well. So for an OPD patient, for an outpatient department patient, this is the last point where you can check and deliver that product. So when you go to the administering, I meant administering in the wards. That's basically giving the same medication, but in the wards, what happens is the medication is transferred from the pharmacist to the nurse. There's one area of opportunity to check it there. The second opportunity is before the nurse administers it to the patient. And there are a number of studies that show medication errors, especially administration errors, and which are actually aggregated into, if you find out studies, there was a recent study in 2017 that was done in about 9 African hospitals, 51 studies, and the number of, the percentage of preventable adverse drug events that include medication administration error, product misplacement and everything, mislabeling, that was over 43%. That's actually half of what we're administering could be prone to mistakes. So these 2 points before administering, if there is a system where we can track the product ID, product authentication, including a caregiver ID, would give you a very good information and a very good point of acting before you deliver that falsified or that misplaced or mislabeled drug to the patient. And mostly, these actually are the gravest of conditions because they're actually administered directly to the bloodstream or directly to the patient's body. So when you provide a robust track and trace system, whatever it is, you have a safe and effective treatment because it provides you with these informations. Good. So what would be the benefits in hospitals? Obviously, one of the things that we see, and one of the things that actually would make sense to a lot of us, as well as policymakers, the same is the financial implication that we have with a track and trace system. There have been trials of trying to have track and trace systems, but some of them are actually incomplete. And you cannot rely on real-time data so that you can act or your decision-making is in time to save the patient's life. So the financial implication would be you would have a greater inventory control over your stock. One of the things that we see in a lot of hospitals is if you do not have full control of your inventory or stock, all the efforts that you have done until that point of saving the budget of the facility, of trying to choose the right products because you have limited amount of budget, all that goes in vain, even after you get the inventory. The next one is it decreases wastage. The standards, the targets that we had were to decrease the number of wastage, especially due to expiry of drugs, to less than 2%. So the current numbers are much more than that, but we are actually going to that target. That does mean if you are spending millions, actually not if, when you're spending millions of birr or millions of dollars on your stock, there's a very good chance that since you don't have full control of your inventory, a number of it goes to wastage. So that's what I meant by even after the product successfully makes it to the facility, it might not reach the patient. Because if we consider the hospital as the last client, that's also a mistake. Because even after the hospital takes that product, a number of things that could go bad could hinder that product from reaching the patient and saving a life. Recall processing. There have been incidents of official recalls by FMHACA from different hospitals. The number of, the amount of time it takes to identify the product, to identify the number of facilities that got that product, the number of the amount of people it takes to contact those facilities, to go there, track it, find the real stock in the facility, and recalling it takes a tremendous amount of effort. With a robust track and trace system and real-time data, this amount of time and amount of effort, especially in human resource, is significantly decreased. So all these inculcates into the financial implication, because anything nowadays can be converted into money. Any kind of effort that you make, any kind of process can actually have a monetary value, as can be supported by our pharmacoeconomists if they're in this conference. The next one is your saving of time and HR efficiency, which I mentioned before. The amount of labor effort that it takes to identify and segregate the items when they're received at the hospital is huge. One of the things that you'll find uniform in all our healthcare facilities nowadays, and that has been for the past few decades, is we're using a manual system. Since it's mandatory, you find it in every healthcare facility. When any product is received or requested or issued, you have those formal vouchers that you fill in manually. And the amount of time it takes for a hospital to refill these products almost every 15 days from PFSA or from any other donor takes a number of people. So most facilities try to adjust this by increasing the number of store personnel they have, since it's being done manually. So for an automated system to decrease this amount is an obvious fact. The next is processing time. Obviously, if you, without increasing the amount of people that you have to hire, if you have an automated system that is supposed to read your product and authenticate it within seconds, you decrease the amount of processing time. Then that includes all those steps of recall and inventory management. And apart from that, even after the products makes it to the nurses, the processing time it takes to actually identify the drug. The previous presenter mentioned the incident about the heparin, and these are some of the issues that it could prevent. Clinical outcomes, these are obvious, but this is where it takes the human touch. All the technicalities that we talked about actually get meaning of a human being here, because you can decrease the amount of preventable adverse drug events because of this. There is a ridiculous amount of statistic data that suggests that most of the adverse drug events are preventable. They are actually avoidable if you have a correct system. And you should not actually rely wholly on the human factor, because the human factor by itself has a tremendous amount of error by nature that's innate. Most of our hospitals actually have thousands of patients. For instance, our hospital sees around 2,200 patients per day. And that's a tremendous amount of load for fixed number of healthcare professionals. And you cannot rely on these people fully to do all this and expect a correct outcome every single time. All right. So we've talked about these. Let's say there is a central database with real-time and updatable data. These two are very important for hospitals. If the data or the information that you have on a product is not real-time, it's not worth depending on it to decide. It has to be real-time. The data that you find like a week ago, if you use that kind of data on your patient now, that would mean a serious distinction between sickness and health, and life and death. And it has to be updatable. There could be a number of mistakes, especially during input of data. That's why we have a number of data encoders in many of our service facilities to encode actual data, so that the central database is updatable each time. The next one is traceability. We've talked about this for the past 2 days. Product authentication and product tracking. That's really important as well, because the physician in the ward does not know, but let me put it this way, the physician in the ward and the nurse trust the pharmacist on the product. They might not ask any secondary questions because they have got that product from the pharmacist. The pharmacist is trusting the supplier to get him the authentic products. If there is no system that comes from the manufacturer, it goes on until the last or the first or the initial point of origin of the product. So that dependency on human has to be transferred somehow to a system where we can trust and control ourselves. Time efficiency, we've talked about this, staff burden and data entry. One of the biggest factors of attrition rates in hospitals, why a number of healthcare professionals leave and request their termination of employment because of burden, especially in most of the service providing centers. And you reduce your preventable errors in medication administration, as well as input and encoding. One of the issues that GS1 is providing that is actually enticing in these situations is there are facilities that have automated systems, but any kind of data is input manually. It's not a scan-based system. That increases the process time. It is an advantage over the manual, but still, you reduce the amount of time if there is a barcode scanning and if you have a robust system that you can trust. So all this inculcates into the patient. And seeing a patient who has come from the far ends, as we are a tertiary referral hospital, people come from all over the country, with the biggest thing they have when they come that is actually invaluable is the amount of trust that they have on the healthcare facility to take care of them or their child. And this is the biggest satisfaction that we have when you see a smiling mother or a playing child after they have won, that war against the disease, which could be a very simple thing. So coming to the last slides. So this was very interesting to me, although some of them are actually going to take a number of years from now. As Alf was mentioning yesterday, he said this is not going to happen today or tomorrow or 6 months from now. It's going to take a number of years, but we have to stay committed to start it, to be proactive about this. But some of these may be like dreams to most of the African countries in such scenarios. We do 1 and 2. For example, you take the medications, you authenticate it here, in the store, take it to a personnel who are going to distribute it, could be dispensing area. And you have the barcoding on the medical devices. And this is very good, it's interesting, the caregiver IDs. That is also one of the factors that contributes to medication errors because there's a tremendous amount of information that is hidden after an incident of medication errors so that you can't find out who was responsible. Devices, procedures, and final transactions. This is a model that we expect to see in the end, but as I said, hospital is like the grassroots level, and it is actually one of the things that this traceability system is going to reach at the last moments, but as I said before, and I stand on this, is the most important part of the track and trace system. That's what when we mean by end-to-end traceability, I consider the last E as the patient, not the hospital or the facility. So, next to last slide. What can we do now? We have to be perceptive. We need to have a clear understanding, and we need to be clear on this, but we have to have clarified expectations. Because when we start some projects like these that's going to take a number of years, we have to have a vision of what's going up at the end. So we have to clarify our expectations now. And we have to be proactive, stay positive, embracing positive change. We have to agree on an aligned strategy. This is by far the most important thing that I would say. We have to have standard objectives. Even with the systems that we have currently, you see a diversified level of implementation over the healthcare facilities that we have, even with the systems that we have that are supposed to be as minimum requirements. So we have to have an aligned strategy as a country and set minimum requirements so that a patient that is far from the capital city gets the same kind of treatment and same kind of clinical outcome as the person who is visiting his physician in Addis Ababa. And stay committed. It's like planting a tree or getting a child. I'm using that analogy because you can't just plant a tree and then expect it to grow after you flee the area. You have to water it. That's the monitoring and evaluation part. You have to take care of it, protect it, secure it, and you see the results. As long as you want to see the results of the fruits, which is going to happen not 6 months from now or tomorrow, the fruit is going to bear after the tree is self-sufficient to do that. So leaving you with, according to CNN, an African proverb. I stand corrected if it's not Ugandan, but we have to have an aligned strategy because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carl. And I think you're totally right. The hospital is really the last and important step to implement. And you explained that very well. Before we come to the closing remarks, I was asked to show you a little video which was being put together by hospitals in the US when they started to implement and recognized, well, healthcare is really beyond what retail is doing. So I hope this will clarify a little bit for you what really would be if we don't have GS1 standards. And Philip, I hope you get this.
Excuse me, is this working?
That scanner is working just fine. However, that barcode just needs that bad boy. Yep.
Oh.
Good to go.
Thanks. Oh, excuse me. I just need one of these, not the whole case. I could never eat all of these. They'd go bad after a week.
I'm sorry. That's the only number we have to use. It's not ideal, but it's what everyone does.
I really need a tomato. There's no information for this.
We can't have information on all the products.
Excuse me?
That would defeat the purpose, wouldn't it?
The purpose? Well, what is the purpose?
To differentiate the product. Our supplier's information is proprietary. It's $1.19.
I'm sorry, which one?
Oh, just try one.
Ooh, that's not it. That's not it either. There we go. A little help, please. It wants a code.
Oh. You just punch in that code into the scanner right there. I think you had a typo. Just try it again.
Oh.
There you go. Thank you.
So
sorry, the item you scanned is not in our database. Please select another item.
Hey, could you take a look at this, please? I've been using this. Should I have been notified about a recall?
Oh, well, we have no way of knowing what lot number you were using or how to even contact you.
Well, how serious is it?
Well, they did recall these. Tell you what, here's a customer service request. Go ahead and fill that out, and we'll get back to you in about 30 days.
This appears to be expired.
I can't really verify that with the information here. That product doesn't follow the data standard that allows us to track expiration dates. I really wish I could verify that for you, but it looks fine. Why don't you just try it?
So let me get this straight. Are you telling me you can't verify expiration dates, lot numbers, recall warnings? Half your products can't be scanned. Some don't have a code while others have more than one. Wouldn't it just be easier to go back to price tags?
What? With all this modern technology? Not a chance. Have a nice day.
So funny, but also real life. And I think it shows you how important it is to have an harmonized approach and standards, really. And I find in healthcare it is much more important because that is for patients. So I find to have the right drug or the right medical device where the patient needs it is more important than a yogurt, peanut butter, or something else. With that, I invite for the closing remarks Keith Ham from US Ethiopia. After that, for GS1 Healthcare, Fergal McGroty, one of our tri-chairs, and Yuhulu for FM Haka Ethiopia will close it down.
Our prior speaker had mentioned the benefits of youth from being in Ethiopia in the year 2010. Unfortunately, I did not get any of those benefits, so I have to put my glasses on to be able to see. I hope that you all found this week to be exciting and fruitful. I know that I have. There's a saying that all good things must come to an end. And today, as we close the first ever African GS1 conference, it's a very good conference coming to a close. But I'd like to challenge everyone to look at this not as the end, but as the beginning. This week seemed to be like a sprint, as we heard from Tanzania, Nigeria, Korea, among others. Regulators such as FDA, WHO, solution providers, and we connected with each other throughout the week individually. Organizing and hosting a conference, an international conference such as this size, takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and resources. I'd like to acknowledge the work that has been done to put this conference together and make it possible for all us to have this learning opportunity. Special thanks and acknowledgement to the Ethiopian Conference Technical Working Group that worked tirelessly on this event for the last 6 months. And also the National Steering Committee, which gave guidance to the Technical Working Group and worked with a number of the international donors as well as GS1. Age Free, who provided a lot of the support outside of the group and Technical Working Group, and also provided substantial funding to make this conference possible. And many of you are attending with no conference fee. And finally, to GS1 for all of your incredible support. I know that you do this twice a year. You put on conferences, but obviously, as everyone is aware, this is the first time that GS1 conference has been put on in Africa. And I think that we had a few unique challenges that we all had to work through. Some of you I know were in Dubai for the April 2016 conference. That conference was my first GS1 conference, and it opened a world of new ideas and new possibilities. Many of you last night went to the cultural restaurant for the networking event, and from all accounts and everybody that I saw dancing on the stage and in the aisles, we had a good time. In Dubai, I chose to participate in the networking opportunity. It was an evening trip through the desert, ending in a wonderful dinner in a camp. I was in the middle seat of a Land Cruiser, and Alto Yahulu was sitting beside me. And the ride out to the desert was nice. The road was smooth. The air conditioning was on, no bumps. We were chatting, having a good time, and then we turned off the road. Well, after the first 2 or 3 ascents up those dunes, I started to wonder the wisdom of my participation in this networking event. And as the journey continued, Yahulu or I would turn to each other as we reached the top of the dune. Certainly, this has to be the last one. And as we saw the next series of dunes in front of us, we encouraged each other that certainly we were going to make it to the bottom. We weren't going to roll over. Everything would be fine. And so there was a great sense of relief when we crested that last dune. We'd made it. We'd survived. And over dinner that night, we talked about moving GS1 forward in Ethiopia. That experience still shapes the Ethiopian journey. Yahulu and I talk about that all the time. So as we leave here today, I'd like everybody to remember your track and trace journey will be much like our desert journey of 2016. It'll be full of excitement, worry, and doubt. You'll think you've reached the top of that last dune only to find out that there's yet another hurdle that you'll need to confront, that you'll need to overcome. But in the end, we're going to arrive at our destination. The people that our supply chains serve and benefit will be better off. They'll have healthier outcomes, increased availability of high quality commodities and medicines that they can trust, healthcare centers and health workers that they have trust in, that they're going to receive what they need and when they need it. So let's stay in touch. Let's encourage each other. Let's share our successes. And probably more importantly, let's share our failures so that we can complete the implementation of one global standard to benefit everybody that we serve. USAID is honored and privileged to be able to support this effort and to continue working on this project in Ethiopia and at the global level. And we look forward to continuing this great initiative and the journey that we're on. And I hope to see you all at the next GS1 conference, wherever that may be in Africa. Thank you.
Yep, it's me again. So I need everybody to do something for me. I need you all to stand up for a second, please. Bear with me. Can you all put your hands out like that? Can you put your hands together like that in front of you? And can you put your hands back out like that again? Thank you. You can sit down. Great. I can now tell my colleagues I got a standing ovation, so that's fantastic. That's great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so as a healthcare provider, I was honoured to be asked to speak here today. I think this is what we want to do. We want to help people, but there's a lot of thank yous and a lot of people that have been involved, and their names should be. There are too many to mention, so they're all up here. And it's amazing, on a Thursday morning, normally the speakers, any speakers here will tell you we're normally talking to each other because everybody's gone home. And I can't believe that we have a full house here again this morning. So it's a testament to the conference organisers and to the quality of the conference itself. Especially the GS1 team, and Eureka keeps saying that they're not conference organisers. They're what they do is standards, but I keep saying to her, if these barcode things don't work out, you do have a future in conference organizations. But all the attendees, so give yourselves a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Eureka, Vice President of JS1, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the organizing committee and myself, I would like to say congratulations for all of you for this successful deliberation of the first African conference held in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, the capital city of Africa. We as organizing committee and FEMACA very much happy because we achieved the objectives of the conference. When you start the conference, we set 4 objectives. The first one was creating awareness. And we are 100% that participants in this hall and who attend the live transmission of this conference, we hope that they create awareness about JS1. We Ethiopians, the participants here from Ethiopia, from manufacturers, importers, from universities, regulatories, from any sector who participate in this conference, we are aware more about what is JS1 and how to implement JS1. So this was the first objective that we set, and we agree as an organizing committee, this objective is success and educate. We learn from hospitals, we learn from manufacturers, we learn from partners, we learn from different presenters. So as an organizing committee, we said we achieved this objective too. And the third one, sharing experience. From the starting date up to the the St. Paul Hospital, we learn more experience. And we discuss with the committee members of the organizing. We have to sit down by tomorrow and we have to revisit our roadmap because we learn experience from experienced and implemented countries. And this objective is again achieved. And the third one, the fourth one, creating network between manufacturers and partners, manufacturers with manufacturers, importers with importers, solution providers with solution providers and manufacturers. You know, yesterday, I called to my secretary to print more address cards because I exhaust all the address cards that I have in my pocket. So this is, indicates that there were, more networking between or among different partners, manufacturers, importers, solution providers, and so on. So, and we observe at tea break, at, lunchtime, and even I missed yesterday dancing. So everyone were they discuss among themselves. So that is networking. So that is, again, we achieved this objective. So when you see the attendance of the participants, we missed only 33 participants among the 300 expected participants. So we missed them. Maybe we'll find them next African conference in Nigeria. Do you agree, the Nigerians? Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ulrika with her JS1 team, making this conference very colorful and fruitful. Because as Ethiopian, we cannot achieve this success if Ulrika with her team leads this conference. We don't have, we didn't have any experience to manage this type of conference. So I thank you very much, Ulrika, and your team. And our partners, USAID, AIDS Free, and UNFPA. Behind FMAC and PFSA, these partners are there. Whenever we have, some challenges, we call them. We need this technical assistance. We need this finance. We need this and that. So they are, every time, at any time, they are with us. And we want to thank again our partners, so that other partners, please join us and let us make this, initiative realized in this country and in all over the African countries. And I would like to thank again member of the steering committee, member of the organizing committee, and technical working group. So they were, dedicated to make this conference successful conference. We promised to Ulrika and USAID, we can make it, successful conference. And they did it. So thank you very much, member of steering committee, organized committee members, and technical working group. And I thank you, all of you, who teach us, who shared your experience. Even I thank you very much who are, listening and learning from others. So I thank you very much, all of you. And finally, please identify your flight. Capture your plane on time and share us when you arrive at your destination. Safe travel. Thank you very much.
No more words from me than a really big thank you for everybody who has made this possible. A lot of work is going into this. It was a unique experience, I think, also for all of us from GS1. We are really grateful for all the support we have gotten, for all the voices which we could listen to. Thanks to all of you for staying with us through the 3 days. Hope to see you again. Safe travels home. Thank you very much. And we are still here to answer questions this afternoon.